Hey, this is Smithy, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
A great philosopher once said, stop, drop, shut 'em down, open up shop. Oh, no, that's how Rough Riders roll. Now, I'm no Rough Rider, but GamerSupps stops me buying other energy drinks. This weekend, they've dropped a sale for free shipping on orders over $30 and have indeed opened up shop with this custom Thorin's Thoughts shaker that you can buy. Now, the new Clyde's Black Cherry flavour, delicious. That's how GamerSupps boys roll. Code Thorin, Thorin, for that free shipping on orders over $30. Now, the LCS has been known for quite some time in League of Legends as a money region, and as a result, it has famously, consistently attracted import players from other regions. At this point in time, the major regions. I mean, we even had someone come from the LPL after a big Worlds performance last year. So you look at it, plenty of EU players have made their name, their career in LCS, found success there that maybe they didn't have or didn't have as much of in Europe. It has been the main import region in the history of the game, like I alluded to, along with the LPL, China. By the way, it's even more required in LCS because they don't have as much native talent. China at least always had some good Chinese players. They just sometimes didn't have the same level of superstars as the LCK, at least in the first 2 or 3 years of the LPL. Obviously now they have fabulous teams, as you saw from the likes of Top Esports, RNG, teams that didn't need any imports in terms of Koreans. Now, the long track record of stars going to the LCS is also connected to a pattern that you will have noticed, especially this year or so with some of the big drama, which is, man alive, do a lot of stars and big names end up benched at some point in their career if they play in the LCS. And I think this actually, I'll talk about this later, I think this will actually affect Europeans coming over in the future as LEC becomes more of an attractive prospect. And this becomes more of an issue where you see the track record, you just think, that'll happen to me if I go there. Maybe I won't risk going there and end up on a bench halfway through the year. So consider these names I'm going to list off here. These are names that have all been either stars and big names in the LCS, or at some point in their careers, they've been at least good players at their position. Jensen, obviously an MVP candidate. Alphari, MVP candidate. Svenskeren did win an MVP in LCS. Someday considered the best top laner many, many years. Jizuki, I will say someday technically was benched for import reasons, but even then, that can happen to you as well. Jizuki, obviously one of the better mid laners when he first came over. Meteos has been an MVP candidate himself. Doublelift has been an MVP of the league. Xmithy, arguably the most decorated jungler from the region. Soaz, a GOAT candidate for the Western region. Treats obviously became a very good player when he came back to Europe for SK Gaming. Piglet was a world champion before he went to LCS. Dardoch was one of the best NA native talents for many, many years, was benched a million times. And Sven was at one point in time considered to be in the best Western bot lane and got benched at least once in this particular scenario, obviously on Cloud9. So the problem I have here is the overall approach. Like generally, there's two main reasons you bench a player in LCS. It's either performance, they're not playing well enough, the team isn't playing well enough, or it's attitude issues, they're causing issues directly with their behaviour, or their relationship with someone else just messes up the whole dynamic of the team, as was alluded to. Maybe that was the case with Sven. So if it's performance, it vaguely makes sense to bench some of these players. It doesn't entirely, because at the end of the day, if this is like a star player that you imported, or a big name player, and you spend a lot of money on him, you are just throwing that money into a black hole if he doesn't play in the game. Like, I would still continuously, again and again, try playing this player, because if it ever clicks, there's a reason why you signed a big name player and imported them. There's a reason why you wanted a star player. Realistically, it's probably better to work with a busted player like that than it is some young talent who we don't know how much talent they've got, and we absolutely have no clue they can ever come anywhere close to what you thought that star could. I'd still rather work on the equation, but okay, I get that some people think this just hasn't worked. I'm going to bring in this other guy that at least temporarily or in the short term appears to be working or adds a better team dynamic. I'll also throw this in as well. When people talk about the idea of like benching for performance issues, okay, that is sort of an old school sports approach. Like the guy can't play, so you put someone else in there and give them a crack. The problem is, I would even say in the modern day, I think a lot of the very brilliant, innovative coaches, like obviously Phil Jackson's one from the NBA that stands out in this sense. I think a lot of them, their approach in the modern day is you want to like imbue your players with a sense of responsibility for their performance and for the results. So sometimes, like Phil Jackson famously wouldn't take timeouts or bench certain players if they were underperforming. Sometimes he would just leave the players out there, essentially sink or swim style, or I would say the analogy is more like when you push the mother bird pushes the baby eagle out of the nest, and yeah, if it crashes to the floor and dies, it dies, but you know what, in that scenario it has to be nudged to finally go for it and actually try and fly and succeed in this respect. So I think there's also something to be said for that, for making people actually work through problems, even making them figure it out themselves. Like, spoiler, one of the best coaching techniques you can use is a Socratic method of asking questions, and even in how you say what you say, keep making it the onus on them to answer the question, and eventually they actually come up with what you could have told them at the very beginning, but they come up through it by following a path of logic and understanding concepts you've explained, and when they themselves come up with the answer, A, it's more likely to stick, and B, they actually think they came up with themselves, so it means something to them in a way that it might have just been a throwaway comment from you initially if they don't get where you're coming from. So in that sense, you sometimes want players to not have the answer. You want them to work around that, or to be comfortable with that and learn what to do around that and how to still have some impact on the game. And then I'll finally say, I also think what's so ignored is when you bench someone like this, even if they go and do a great job in scrims or academy or whatever, as a sub or whatever, you might also have just killed their confidence entirely, and they might just be completely out on you as a coach or the team in general and just think, fuck it, who even cares then? Even if they bring you back at that point, you might just be like, this is already done. Now, if it's for attitude, okay, I can sort of get that. The problem is this. People are using this like sports and esports are 1-for-1. In most sports, when you sub someone, especially American sports, you can just sub them temporarily and say something to them on the bench or go, look, cool down for 5 minutes. So you know what, I'm going to give you a rest now. You're not playing well. I'll insert you again in the next quarter, the next half, whatever. You can't do that in League of Legends. Once they're out, they're out. And when they come back in, they're back in. There's no scenario of actually subbing in the same game. You can't insert them and then take them out again. A game is a game, right? In fact, in some series, you can't always do that. Depends on the circumstances of the league, obviously. Then you've got to add in, there's way more people on most sports teams. So usually, you're either working with a giant rotation anyway, like basketball or NHL, or if it's something like American football or European soccer, you're working with an enormous amount of players. So subbing isn't always just wrecking the entire team. Sometimes a tiny... We're talking about taking a fifth of your team out in this scenario. And it's one of your star players. Then let's add in, whereas like, listen, subs aren't always the best on sports teams, but you can have talent depth at positions. You can't almost have that at League of Legends because you don't have world-class players on your bench typically. So what that means is when you do sub out a star player, so I've crucially made this about stars and big names, you're nearly always replacing them with an inferior player. Inferior in any sense. Individual skill, confidence, experience level, actual ability at that position. Guess why? Because otherwise they'd be the one you'd be starting now. You wouldn't have either A, signed the starter, or B, you'd have this guy in over them if they were actually better at the game. Surely, if that's what you're trying to do, just win games. So the problem is when you bring in a worse player, you're at best only saying either I'm going to give this star player some time off to figure it out, or he's playing so badly, I just want to raise the floor of our overall team level so the other players have a chance, or you're hoping at some point that this actually motivates the star to figure his attitude out and then come back and be better. But there's the problem, right? Ultimately, you are doing it all, admitting on some level, whether publicly or just implicitly, I'm going to bench you for attitude issues. I'm going to bring in a player who's worse than you. He might play slightly better than you. You probably still are better. But somehow, I hope you're just going to take this moment, like the shame of me doing this and the obviously like the public statement that of losing confidence. I hope you're going to take all that to heart and then work through it and come back. My issue is, if you get to that point in time, are they really going to ever turn around like that? I could see you really losing a lot of players. I can tell you right now, I've known a lot of European star players who messaged me when they were benched for attitude reasons and just basically said, fuck this coach, fuck this team. Or like, you know what, I'll play, but like, that's just ruined my whole heart for it. And you know what team worse? Like my teammates didn't tell me that there was these issues, or they did. The worst one I noticed they feel like is when they feel like it comes out of nowhere. Like they weren't truly warned. Like there was just a bad couple of games, or they had one small fight, and then all of a sudden they just told one day, yeah, you're out now. And it's like, what the fuck? Where's this coming from? You can lose a lot of players doing that, especially stars. If you're a star and you join a game, odds are you expect that when I join the game, you're going to build the team around me. You're going to give me the pieces I need. And if I have 1 or 2 bad games, you're not just going to blame me. That's what it feels like if you're a star and you get benched in the scenario, like everyone else just turned against you. And then, because you need this player to win and to be the best team, that's why you signed them, they're a star player. When you then bring him back, it can't just be that he comes back and just hope it all worked out. If you haven't got positive signs it's worked out, you have gambled your whole season or split on this guy being benched and coming back better. If he doesn't, what message do you send? I always gave the example of in Team Liquid Breaking Point that when they benched Dardoch, they did it in the stupidest fashion ever because they brought in an inexperienced player who hadn't really, like, long-term really proved himself in the LCS to replace him. He did badly in the first couple of games, so they immediately took him out and they just said, like, Dardoch, please come back, we need you. But he hadn't learned his lesson because you didn't make him learn the lesson. If anything, he taught you a lesson that he was more valuable than whatever bloody teaching moment you were trying to have because you need to win the next week of LCS. And there's another issue. If you're going to bench like this, do it on players where you got them for 2 or 3 years and you genuinely want to use them for 2 or 3 years, but just right now, maybe in the first split, there's a few problems. If you're making it a really long-term solution where this really matters, I'm trying to do this the right way, that I can get. If you're playing just this split or this season with this guy, look, shit, I'll get off the pot. Use him or just don't use him at all. This in-out approach, I think it's a joke. I think it just cripples the rest of your team. It fucks up all the narratives. It's even worse when, along with the idea that I'm going to replace him with an inferior player, then there's that false pretense that everyone has to put on, including players in the team I know still come out and make statements, where you all have to gaslight the community that your sub player from academy or just a sub is somehow as good or better than the players replacing, or even could be when I'm talking about a superstar player like Alphari, Doublelift, Jensen. I'm sorry, whoever you've got coming in almost certainly is nowhere near the level of these players and will not play to the level they play to at their peak, whether they were at their peak or not. Like the idea I had to have people last split gaslighting me on the broadcast and from Team Liquid the org that it's in any way reasonable that like Jenkins could be as good as Alphari or even better or be the permanent starter over Alphari. No, Alphari wasn't just the best top laner, he was the best player in the whole LCS, and that the whole story was fuckery, but they had to gaslight it. This guy's just fine, it's great, and it screams. In fact, I was thinking of bringing this guy. Get the fuck out of my face with that one. I'll even say as well, I don't think it's often fair to the player you replace them with. Like, this player can get fucked over big. That's basically what happened to Leader in Europe, but it happened tons of times in LCS. Think about it, you're coming in on, let's say, week 4 in game, I don't know, 6, 7 or whatever, maybe 7 or 8 at that point in time, right? When you come into this game now, you're starting later in the split than everyone else. You're playing with teammates who you haven't played with for the whole split, might not have as much playing time as the teammates, as the opposition you play against, and you're going to be judged off this one time you're inserted like that with a totally different set of teammates around you. And if you do badly there, listen, everyone's forgot about the guy benched for the moment, but they're going to look at you and go, you're just dog shit, man. That might set your career back years. You might have been just on the cusp of getting playing time, and the next year, some other LCS team might have bought you as their starter. But then they saw it worked out before, and they went, nah, I don't know about that, actually. Ooh, that was a bit rough, though. You remember that game you had on Kane when they put him in 4? I don't know about that one. They were just looking at the starter there. It was never about you, unfortunately. It's very rarely that you're going to come in and just outperform a world-class player who can't play in that position with all these disadvantages. And I'll also say this as well. This needs to be added in there. You better be making this team a better performer, more likely to win, or a better team environment if you make these benchings. If you then bench the player, bring in a young player who doesn't do that well himself, and the team still has the same fundamental problems, what are you doing at that point in time, aside from basically telling, like, your favourite kid, by the way, no Christmas presents for you this year because you misbehaved? It's like, look, that's a lesson in a way, but is it really going to turn out the way you want it to? Is that actually going to be worth it for everyone involved? Are you just going to ruin Christmas for yourself, the family, the guy himself? Isn't he just going to resent you? Haven't you sort of broken the whole approach to the team? When he then sees you put Jenkins in and you play worse and you lose the game, isn't he going to look at you and go, why the fuck would I ever care about these guys? They don't even care about actually winning. They're just sticking it to me. That's one of the issues I have here. And I'll say this, I put a lot of this onus on the coaches, not the orgs themselves, because I see a lot of these benchings as the last resort that essentially is just to offset coach failure. Like, you were given one of the best players in the world, one of the best players in the West, and you were unable to make it work with him, either individually or attitude-wise. You can't get buy-in playing-wise or attitude-wise, and you're going to bench your best player or players because they're having problems in reviews, or they're talking back to you, or they're arguing with each other. Really? That sounds like you can't do your job. It sounds like you don't have man management skills. It sounds like you can't get this player to buy into what in theory should be a better way of playing the game. Guess what? Your job is to get that buy-in. At one point in time, I look at it and I go, look, that player was amazing before this team, probably amazing afterwards. He might certainly have had issues, but I've got to look at whether this coach is making it work or not. Like, a lot of these moves, some of them, like the jab with Alphari, I think that's just ego. I don't think that's even based on performance or attitude-wise. I think that's just going, right, fuck it, this guy's pissed me off, so I'm going to sit him out. And let's see if I can make him bow to me and bend him to my will, and then maybe we can have a relationship. Right? Well, at that point in time, by the way, if you're a legit star player, you've got over the line already. You're out of pocket. Like, I don't want to be on your team. I don't want you to want me to be on your squad. I want the fucking split to end. I want to go back to wherever I came from or a different team. I want to destroy you if I ever play, but fuck do I want to help you? Why would I want you to succeed after what you've done to me? And I had an ego flex. I also think, as I alluded to before, way too many of these benchings are just sudden. To the players, at least, the warning signs might have been there from the coaches, and they might use some very soft, vague language around, like, oh, we'll have to review your performance if this continues. Stuff. The problem is the player doesn't get that. He genuinely, no joke, a double F type guy needs you for real to call him, yep, yo, what's up? Yeah, the stream's on right now, so say anything private. Double F here. At that point, right, he expects you for real to just say, I'm just going to tell you right now, Double, if it's not very good next week, I'll probably have to bench you. If you don't do that, if you just go, we're going to have to reconsider the way the team is set up, or, certain relationships I feel like aren't being very productive. If you then bench him the next week, he's not going to have got any of those, like, none of those clues worked for him. That may as well be your husband who's just missing all the fucking hints his wife's given off about something she doesn't like and going, but she said it was all right for me to go out with the boys if I thought it was the right thing, and I did. So I went, oh, why is she upset at me? Like, read the fucking room, mate. So in that scenario, I blame the coaches to some degree. Like, you've got to be a bit firmer if you're going to go to the drastic extreme resort of removing the player from the game entirely. That's a last resort. That's a smash in case of emergency. That's not the first thing you do when you just can't control the guy or you lost 4 games in a row in the LCS. And so my issue here is the subbing approach is totally different in all other regions in terms of the major ones. Like in EU, there are so many native talents that, yeah, you can actually replace people who have a bad attitude or are fucking up the team dynamic, no matter how good they are in theory in the game. And at least, by the way, they'll be competitive to win their spot back. The guy who's coming in as a sub-jungler or support, he might genuinely be a guy who in the RLs was ready for the LEC, he just didn't get a spot, and he might actually take this guy's starting spot and become one of the better players in the league. That happens in the LEC. That doesn't fucking happen in LCS, or it very rarely does. Then consider the Asian regions, just forget about that right now. China and Korea legit have some of the most skilled players in the world, sometimes not in starting positions, either as a sub or fresh just out of solo queue or just too young to play yet. So as a result, the guy coming in to replace whoever I'm replacing now, he actually might be a star talent, if not now, tomorrow or in 3 months. By the end of the split, he might be one of the best players in the league. That has happened. And also, I'll add this in as well, they also have a different strategic approach to subbing in Korea, like 2 classic examples, because these teams essentially were able to win worlds doing this, would be when Ambition and Bengi were individually a bit washed as players, but they were good brain junglers and knew how to play and be clutch on LAN in a big pressure game. And so the coaches of their teams, Samsung Galaxy and SKT, would replace the young mechanical skilled junglers, Haru and Blank, at key moments in big playoff series when they needed either to play more of a macro game, more of a scaling game, or they just needed the veteran jungler to just kind of stabilise things, like the up-and-coming players. He's looking a little bit hit and miss, or he's just had a really bad game and his confidence suffers. Then you add in, there was even supposedly with some of those teams, the benefit that in theory you got to, if you're the sub-jungler and a veteran, you were also watching what was happening with the other jungler, and you could maybe have a sense for what he's not understanding about how the other jungler's playing, areas that he missed out on. You might have a sense of what was working in his path and what wasn't. You're just coming in fresh. You've got some data to work with, as it were. None of this really applies, quite frankly, to how they're doing the subbing in LCS, like I say. And going forwards, I do think this is going to be a major issue. I know it doesn't seem like it right now, but the Alphari one especially, and I'll say on some lesser degree the Sven case, these are going to be warning signs, red flags. These are going to be reasons EU talent think twice about coming to LCS. Because the LEC salaries are already starting to catch up. Like LCS isn't paying the same top end, like they sort of leveled out a little bit in some degree. Chances of doing well at Worlds, obviously gotten better and better at LEC over the last few years. So even being on that 3rd or 4th LEC team with a chance to go to Worlds, that might be worth it over being on even the best LCS team. Then add in, people have become aware of the culture clash. Mate, when even Perks, Yellowstar and Mithy, by the way, guys who can almost just trip over and find success in EU, if they all go to NA and it doesn't really work out close to what they expected there, and they have issues with teammates and figuring out and resolving problems and people... Listen, boys, these are some of the greatest winners ever Europe has produced. These are the people you put in a team, they're like talismans. They just always have success every year, but they go to LCS, that's where they have their tough times. By the way, that's actually a symptom that implies there's something sick and wrong about the LCS, not those 3 players. Like, it can't just be those players, just bizarrely they're 1 down years when they go to the LCS, can it? Now, here's the thing. In the past, I used to recommend players go to the LCS who were European players, who were good players. But here's how I would explain it. Alphari's the best example. If you're in a team scenario, now look, he could have gone to like the Vitality Super Team or whatever it was at that time before he went to Team Liquid. But once that deal was off the table and Perks is going to Cloud9, if you're Alphari, realistically... if you're not going to get an offer from the top 3 teams in Europe, it is better to go to potentially the best NA team in LCS, get a massive salary, get some even better teammates potentially, and now hope that you being so good and having a great setup means you put them slightly above, and now you're in a team as good as a top 3 LEC team, or maybe even better like Team Liquid arguably was at Worlds. The problem is this. That's the player I would always recommend went to LCS. If you could already get a gig in the top 3 LEC teams, unless you really want the money, my advice was usually just stay in LEC and try and do the best you can at Worlds and just make it about performance. That's why you got into the game. It wasn't just about money, right? And you can still get some pretty good money. Problem now is this. If you are in a team that can, if you are a player that can be in like the 4th to 6th best LEC team, I might also say, look, I'm going more 50-50. How good do you think the LEC team is? Like, how concerned are you about culture clash issues? Do you not worry that if you go there, they'll bench you, it might tank your career? I'd have to start having these conversations. Like, now I feel like unless you're in the bottom LEC teams, I can't just immediately say easily, yeah, just go to LCS. Like, they'll give you more money, better chances. Some of those factors aren't even necessarily the case. And you've seen the impact it can have on people's careers when it goes badly. And by the way, just the public humiliation of being benched. Like, if I'm a legit star player being imported to your region and your team, I'm doing it in good faith that in the same way as I'm going to try my absolute best individually to be as good as I can to justify the millions you're giving me, I also hope you're going to build your whole team around me. You're not just going to treat me like me, Sven, one of the greatest players Europe's produced, is just the same as any player from NA who plays AD carry. And if he's in or I'm out, that's fine. And if there's a problem, then I go. And if there's an issue with me talking to someone else, then maybe you replace me. And you know what? Maybe I just sit out 5. No, that ain't cool. Like, actually, I don't feel like that's a reasonable actual aspect to it. Yes, in a true sporting sense it is. But actually in the way that we look at these people's careers, if we care about where they're at mentally and what their career's doing and what the setup of the team is, esports are very different than traditional sports in that sense. I think a lot more care has to be taken. And quite frankly, this benching approach, with rare exceptions, doesn't really seem like it works. It just makes the LCS look silly because their benches are like talent magnets at this point in time. This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Iskander, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Thooorin, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, Joy, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks goes out as always to Jerky's Minion, but also to Jeremy Dole. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want to ask me a question for one of my video AMAs? Want teasers? Find out who the guests are? Would you like to take part in a lengthy esports discussion with me? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.